Social media has unequivocally changed how we interact with one another. The same effect is going to happen with AI. So in terms of where to be careful and potential blind spots that might pop up when we're using AI tools, I did an interview with a fellow, Matt Perman, who wrote the book What's Best Next. And one thing that he told me really stood out to me. We were talking about social media at the time, but he was telling me that the tool often shapes the user. And so if I'm out in the garden and I'm digging with a shovel or raking with a rake, eventually it's going to leave marks on my hands. It's going to leave calluses. Same thing with digital tools. So social media has unequivocally changed how we interact with one another. The same effect is going to happen with AI. And as you use AI, you'll get into patterns of behavior to where you've got healthy ways of hey, I'm thinking about how I can delegate this task to the machine. But obviously, there's some potential negatives that come along with that. So if I get too over-reliant on a specific tool like ChatGPT, it might tempt me to take my human reasoning out of it and just outsource it. Let's say, let the machine think about it, and then I'm just going to take whatever it gives me and use it verbatim. There's an MIT study that was done not too long ago, and what it did is it took 3 categories of people, and it gave them the task of writing college essays, short essays in response to a simple prompt. And in those 3 groups, the first group, they were only allowed to use a language model like ChatGPT as their source. The second group was only allowed to use Google as their source. And the third group was only allowed to use their brains as their source. And what they were looking at is how does using each one of these tools affect the person who's writing the essay. And they had them hooked up to EEGs and everything to monitor their brain activity. They had some questions on the backside to say, hey, what do you remember out of the content that you created? And what they found was that after a series of 3 essays, predictably, the people who were just using their brains for their source, they were more engaged in the task. They were more likely to remember the things that they had written. And then moving up the ladder, those who were only using the language models as a source, by the third essay, they had just gotten bored with it, and they were copying and pasting straight out of the language model. They were totally disengaged from the task. When they were asked, what did you produce, they couldn't remember what they had written because they hadn't written most of it. And a lot of the news coverage that you saw just stopped there, and they say language models make you dumb. But they missed a 4th step. And so after those initial 3 essays, they took the brain-only category and the language model-only category and switched them and said, if you are in the category that you only used your brain as a source, we're going to put you and say you can use a language model now. And if you are in the language model-only category, you're only going to use your brain now. And what they found was that once they took that group that had been conditioned to use their brains and then put them in the language model category, they performed better than any other category, because now they had, the experience of thinking critically for themselves and thinking through, how do I answer this question from my own mental resources, to now I could do that, plus I've got this seemingly infinite repository of knowledge and ideas. And they performed way better. And so I think the application for that is that as we use the tool, we should never let go of that experience of what it's like to use our own brains. And I think the challenge there is that we flop back into that language model only category, and we forget what it's like we're just doing the task. We're not necessarily engaging with the task. So my encouragement, if you're going to use AI in whatever area of ministry that you're called to, is to use it as the tool that comes second and make it so that it's the spice and not the main dish. You let your brain really chew on the task and then engage the language model, and you're going to do better than if you were to use either one of those categories on its own.